Welcome to The Favorites, the podcast presented by Bet365. We are part of the Volume Podcast Network. I am Chad Millman of the Action Network. Today I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my companion, my compadre, my BFF professional bettor, Simon Hunter. Hello, Simon.
Chad, we made it, brother. We made it, and I needed it bad. I don't know if you know this, but it is the dark days in Philadelphia with Philadelphia sports right now. We don't have playoffs in hockey. We don't have playoffs in basketball. The Phillies have already been – their season's over. It's only in April. The season's over for Philadelphia Phillies. So I need this draft. I just need chaos too. So I'm so happy it's here, brother. We're 4 months away from the start of the season. This will at least hold us over for, what, 2 weeks? A little draft talk. So I'm so happy it's here.
Well, look, it'll be 2 weeks, and then we also get schedule release.
Yeah.
And then we get win totals. And then we get to start the real work of digging in because we'll know the rosters, we'll know the draft picks, we'll know the schemes, we'll know it all, brother. What we're going to know today after we talk to our guests is so much more than we know right now because the 15 minutes we were waiting to go on the air was insane, revelatory. Prices are moving. There are rumors everywhere. There are mock drafts that are so contradictory to each other. Nobody knows anything. We begin the 2025 NFL Draft in Green Bay tonight. Today's show has our co-hosts of the Action Network podcast who have been using that show's NFL Draft coverage for the past 2 months. Two mainstays as guests on The Favorites. Chris Raybon, one of the best fantasy rankers in the history of fantasy rankers. You can also hear him every week on the Fantasy Flex with Sean Kerner, maybe his only equal when it comes to fantasy rankers, and Evan Abrams, our regular director of research, the man who signs authentic jerseys filled with stats he spews on the show. We're going to get to him in a second. As a reminder, The Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365, and new Bet365 customers get $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5. Sign up using promo code FAVORITES. Deposit $10. Place a bet for $5 to get $150 in bonus bets. Those bonus bets can be used on spreads, totals, player props, futures, and more. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. All right, Simon, I want to start with you because we had McShay on the show about a week ago. And he mentioned something about Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise State, who everyone agrees is a singular talent, except for maybe Matthew Friedman. And his draft prospects have been rising. I know Raybon has a lot of thoughts on Jeanty. I know Evan has been combing the catacombs for research on Jeanty. A lot of opinions about Jeanty, who seems to be at a pivot point in this draft. Give me and give the audience, our listeners, the intel that you started hearing after McShay came on the show and talked about Jeanty.
Yeah, and I'll give tons of credit to McShay where he came on here. And again, my ears perked up because I had heard people talk a little bit about Jeanty going outside the top 10. And he was priced that way, right? When he was on here, he was over under 8.5, pick 8.5. And the over, I believe, was like plus 150 at the time. So, minus 200 on the under of 8.5 at that point. It was something around there. He came on here and talked about the possibility of him going to the Patriots, which at the time was 16-1. Now it's 4-1, a week later. So he was really ahead of the market. I took a large position on it just because I believed what he was saying. I love the Jeanty talent. I think what it really came down to what me and you talked about, just the fact that teams have overreacted, in my opinion, to what happened with the Eagles last year and Saquon. Teams think now they think they're running back away, where it's never that easy, right, Chad? We always joke about that. It's not just one piece for most teams. That was a very unique situation, but in the NFL, we've seen that these teams really do believe that. And now, we're sitting here a week later. He might not go to the Patriots, but all of a sudden the Jaguars, or that fifth pick, the trade out position, has become the hotbed. And he is now minus 250 to go, Jeanty, at pick 5, which is crazy to think that, just a week ago, he wasn't even supposed to go in the top 10. Now it's big money, minus money, that he's going to be at pick 5. And to me, I have two big things I need to happen that I bet on. I need Sanders to go top 10. That'd be very profitable for me because I've just been betting really high plus numbers.
Just in case everyone hasn't been listening, you mean Shedeur Sanders?
Shedeur Sanders, yes. Yeah. And Jeanty to be a top 5 pick. Like, as long as he goes under that 6.5, if he slips past the Raiders, I'm going to take a big negative on the day. It's really my largest position, and it's the type of thing where everyone takes position for different reasons. I mainly took a position just because every scout I talked to said he was their number 3, number 2 prospect. Every single one I talked to, Chad. So if I'm getting that info, and then someone like Todd McShay comes on here and says what he says, and then goes on a bunch of other big mainstream shows and starts saying the same thing, that what he's hearing is Jeanty going in top 5, I feel very lucky that we got him in here early, and I was able to bet it really before anyone else. And it's like, that's the dream scenario. I told you I bet it the whole weekend. So when people ask about the draft and my betting style with it, I do bet a lot of stuff, but I try to find 1 or 2 edges and just lean into it hard, like really take a position on it. And then I get caught every now and then. Like me, Chad knows the story. Bryce Young, my worst call ever. I never thought in any world he'd be the number 1 pick. It does happen. So I'm not telling everyone to go out there and put your life savings here on Jeanty being a top 5 pick. We all sit here and we talk with different people, but at the end of the day, like Chris, and I'm sure Evan can attest to it, it's a guessing game at the end of the day, right? We're playing off people's mocks. So I do feel confident, Chad, but you know the deal, brother. I didn't sleep last night. It's a lot of nerves because you're betting on the what if, not so much what you know.
Raybon, you've been loving Jeanty for a long time. You guys have been talking about this. How do you feel about this movement?
It was expected. I think I know me and Evan have been kind of talking about kind of taking, like, looking at that top of the board. There was so much uncertainty, even going back throughout the whole process, kind of take what's the second most likely thing. I know Dan Back and I talked about Jeanty in March to the Jaguars at, I think it was something ridiculous, like 50-1 or something. Like it was nowhere near what it is now. So I think one of the things with the draft, if you've been betting it like throughout the process, you're probably in a great spot right now, as Simon alluded to. But now is the time when you really, really, I think, want to fade the consensus. Like, it's not the time to bet on Ashton Jeanty. But the reason he's there is as he should be is because look at the tea leaves. This is a bad quarterback class. This is a bad draft class in general, according to most scouts. Teams don't have more than probably 10 to 15 first round grades on guys in this whole draft. So what you're seeing is the best players, the cream is rising to the top. And the best players are Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, and Ashton Jeanty, in my opinion. Cam Ward, the Titans are just like, oh man, Will Levis on his knees. We can't do that again. So but Cam Ward's he's not the 4th best, prospect in this class. It'd probably be somebody like Mason Graham or something like that. So it's not surprising at all with Jeanty rising, but I don't think now is the time you want to be investing in him. I think now is the time where you start hitting up these hype guys and kind of fading the hype on guys like Banks, who, like, nothing changed, and he's all of a sudden, like a mocks him number 6, and now his over-under is like number 7, where it was Evan was like in the 20s, or it was 13. It was just 13 just yesterday at plus money, and now it's like 7.5 at some books. So you just got to kind of fade the hype now. But Jeanty is there because he's I think he's a top 5 prospect in a weak class.
All right, before we get to Banks, and we're talking about Kelvin Banks, the offensive tackle from Texas, whose numbers are moving up and his odds are shrinking. Evan, I want, and we're going to get to that conversation. Before we came on the air, you started talking about what some books have been saying about their positioning and what they need tonight related to Jeanty.
Some of this is universal. I've heard it from a few different ones, but the quote is basically they're hoping that Jeanty falls out of the top five and everything else they'll figure out later. And it just seems like everyone has invested in that, whether it's at 4, at 5, top 5. I've even heard some people say, hey, let's take a shot at 3. I just think what Raybon said, most talented players, 1, 2, 3, Carter, Hunter, it's Jeanty at the top. So I just think in a class where the offensive skill position players, including the quarterbacks, are being questioned all over the place, he's just not being questioned. He's one of the more talented running backs we've seen even enter the NFL in the last few years. So I just think it's becoming a, what do I want to give up to move up to get him, or just let someone take the uber talented guy? So I think right now, if you're giving like gambling advice on this, like hours before the draft, I don't think you can invest much into him because again, even at 365 right now, under 6.5 is like minus 550. There's just hard to even invest in those areas, and minus 250 again. And even in the last 24 hours, that 5 slot, he's gone from 170 to 200 to 250. It just keeps moving up. So it seems to be the consensus, honestly.
Yeah, the movement on a lot of these players has been pretty insane. The other player where there's a ton of movement really on his draft position is Shedeur Sanders, quarterback from Colorado. Raybon, what have you seen and why do you think this is moving so much?
So, yeah, to start the process, there was a time when Shedeur Sanders was expected to be the number 1 overall pick. Then he kind of settled in as the consensus number 2 for a while. And then I think, he worked out for some teams and started sliding a bit. But I just don't think that, again, so the way the draft works for people that are unfamiliar is teams have their draft boards and they kind of rate their prospects by round. So they'll be like, all right, we have 10 players with a first round grade. Now there's 32 have to go in the first round, but I think it's a situation where a lot of teams have a second round or even lower grade on a Shedeur Sanders. And so you're just seeing him fall. And I think it's interesting because if you look back at the last 10 years or so, quarterbacks that go in the first round, they only go to teams that they've done a top 30 workout for. The only time that it didn't happen in the first round was Tua in the COVID year, where I think he sent the taped workout in to the Dolphins or something like that. So Shedeur, Dart, all these guys could fall. Like, I think Cam Ward is pretty safe, but I don't think Shedeur Sanders is a great fit in Pittsburgh. I know people are talking about the intangibles, but that's because everyone's just they're just looking at team needs, where we don't really know the grades that these teams have on guys, but just reading between the lines, no one seems in a rush, or no one seems kind of pressed to take or to trade up. So that tells you what these what they feel about the quarterback class and just the class in general. No one's been able to trade, period, because everyone wants to trade back because it's better to just take a bunch of shots because no one really likes anyone. So Shedeur is just kind of included in that. I think the issue with him is arm strength, and that's it. That would be a real issue for Pittsburgh, which is why I don't think he goes 21. And if he doesn't go there, you might just see the second round play out like people thought a month ago or even a couple weeks ago that the first round would play out, where Cleveland, it's between Cleveland and the Giants, who gets Shedeur and who gets Jackson Dart, because just the quarterbacks as a whole are kind of falling. And if other guys are rising, I think it's just kind of fake hype to make up for the fact that Shedeur was at one point expected to go number 2. So now you're seeing like, oh, well, maybe Milroe takes his place. They're like, it's like, no, just no one likes any of these guys. Cam Ward is the best quarterback, and he's meh. Like, I heard a scout say Mason Rudolph would be the number 3 quarterback in this class. So that tells you what people think about this quarterback class.
Well, Simon, you just said that you're heavily invested in Shedeur, top 10. How did you get there?
just because of the numbers. It was most books yesterday moved to 10.5 at plus 300. I said, okay, I'll take a position. And then it goes to 14.5 chat plus 300. Oh, got to take another position, I guess. And then it gets up to 21.5 and it goes, okay, well, we're at this point now. It's not as juiced up, right? I think the 21.5 was minus 115 when I first saw it. So, you're not getting that crazy value, obviously, with the plus number, but still better just because of how much has moved. I could easily be caught here, Chad, but my bet is simply on desperation. And, these teams act confident and secure, but we've seen teams panic time and time again when this draft starts. And it is because so many of these guys are thinking future, right? Like if you're a GM, Sanders might extend you another year or two of a life because you got this young kid in there, right? You got the young quarterback, and it's all about potential. Like this is someone that, people I respect have him graded as their number one quarterback. So when I see that, I'm just like, okay, all it takes is one team to love the kid. That's what I'm betting on. One team to love him. They finally take a position. They move either to take him or they take him to the draft spot they have. So my view of this class is, like when I've talked to scouts, Chad, it's been they love next year. So that's the biggest issue for this class right now is next year's class looks like a juggernaut. It looks like the year before, right? Like you might have 1, 2, maybe even 3 legit QB1 all pros, where this class, like Chris just said, we would all be shocked if Cam Ward ends up being an all-pro. I think he could be talented. I think he could be a pro bowler. But like we've heard, the ceiling for him is like what people compare him to, Steve McNair. That would be insane if he could reach that potential. But the odds are so slim where the next year's class, there feels like there's a couple of guys that have a lot more potential. So that's been interesting to me, Chad, talking to these different teams where it's like, okay, the Browns, they do need a quarterback. Like Chris just said, they might be confident in just waiting to the second round, taking Milroe. They might have a different grade than we all know on Sanders, right? They might have him below Dart and Milroe. So that's what's so fun right now about the betting market. It's like you're hearing so many teams super negative. Are you hearing much positive, Chad, about Sanders? No. And that's for a good reason, right? So that's why I love making these type of bets. I'm betting on that dark horse team that's just not saying a word, like the Atlanta Falcons last year, taking Penix when they did, right? No one saw it coming. That's kind of what I'm banking on here. So, it's really fun where, like, the Rams, I've taken a position on them to take Sanders at 50-1 because I could see in some crazy world McVay loves him and we don't even know. So there's always teams like that. I'll do that, Chad, but it's like, do I have inside info? No. If I did, people, we'd be going crazy on here right now. But yeah, the Sanders chatter to me is interesting. It's all in negative the last 2-3 days before the draft, 0 positive, and that's very telling that there are teams out there that love them. They're just playing the game right now.
How did we get here? Here's what none of this makes sense to me. And it's so stupid. And these are billion-dollar franchises, right? These are not insignificant businesses that are flying under the radar. And these are decisions that have generational impacts on the success of these teams, the revenue these teams can drive, the fandom of these teams, the profile of these teams. These are massive decisions. Shedeur Sanders, during the college football season, everybody's like, oh, this guy's going to be the number one pick. There wasn't even a question, right? It was like consensus. He's the best. He's the guy we want. It's not like Cam Ward, who had a great year at Miami, was that different of a quarterback at Washington State. He just did it against, you could argue, nominally better competition. It's not like the ACC was so much better than the Pac-12. So why is this thing so fucking flawed? It is so stupid. The entire decision-making process to me, it just feels like, Evan, it just feels like we're throwing darts. How are we making any decisions here with any confidence?
I think people started, and this is just my opinion, and you guys can disagree or agree. I think they started meeting with Shedeur, and that's what ended up happening. Like, I think people started to get like a one-on-one experience of talking through the playbook, talking through different things, maybe hearing what he had to say on some of these things. That's when this started to move. Like, no one's done almost anything on the field. No one's done almost anything to move anything, really, aside from having conversations with these players, looking at tape on these players, and trying to make, let's call it $100 million decisions for $1 billion franchises, right? And I think he's moved from 3.5 in terms of his draft position all the way up to 21.5. And at the moment, you've got, maybe your top 8 mock drafters, 4 or 5 of them completely out of the first round, while the other one is like, Pittsburgh, shrug emoji. And that's kind of what the other person has said, because at this point, no one is saying, like Simon said, that they like him. It's all negative energy leading up to the draft, which is completely moving his number up. So, I mean, personally, today, what I would do to bet on it, I mean, I'd probably take a stab on that top 10, but right now the best odds is 3-1. So, I mean, maybe New Orleans at 10-1, and it all being just a smokescreen. And, we heard the Carr stuff yesterday, which was completely strange, completely odd. Like, they have no answers. They won't have an answer before the draft. And now we say, well, they need a quarterback. So at 10-1, that would probably be the way I'd look at it. But you're right, Chad. I mean, it's really, really strange, considering I think it's just movement off of conversations and kind of the GMs and coaches being played off a little bit. Like that. I just don't think they want the circus.
I think this is all just all of the draft stuff and the movement is media generated and prognostication generated. Like, I don't think that these teams are necessarily, here, like, kind of, I don't think they're doing it wrong. I think they probably knew the whole time where their draft board it was. And then it wasn't until people really started laying things out and everyone was kind of waiting for some domino to fall, like, oh, I wish there was a trade so like we could kind of get some sense of like who's going to go where. Literally, guys are moving like halfway up and down the board off one mock draft. And we're day of the draft. And dudes who I couldn't even name put out a mock. Like, I'm not like, you know what I mean? Like, there's just too many of them, but one guy, it's not even like, okay, an overwhelming amount of mocks are doing this. It's like, okay, well, this guy who does mocks and like finished in the top 10 that one year put this guy here. So we got to move him from 13 to 6. Like, it's just, no one knows anything. The teams knew all along, I think. But I think media, first of all, we're always going to be infatuated with quarterbacks. And when it's early in the process and, you're kind of looking at, okay, well, quarterbacks at the top of the board, to Simon's point, you're kind of betting on that desperation. But as we've gotten, I think, closer and closer to the draft, I just think we're kind of seeing a lack of desperation in the actions. Like, it's not just like, I don't think it's just like it's like a smokescreen. And, I think the fact that no movement has been able to happen, no trades have been able to happen, just tells you that teams don't have a lot of first round grades and no one's really trying to trade up for anyone. Everyone's kind of comfortable where they are, just letting the board fall to them because there's not really a lot of upside unless the real reports have been Hunter and Jeanty and Cam Ward. So it makes sense. The top quarterback who's probably in a tier above everyone else, and then just top prospects. So I think the teams knew all along, but it was just kind of the media hype drives it, and it's still driving this crazy movement, and we're hours out. So well, that's why you got faded.
There's no, and McShay alluded to this last week. There really is no upside for any GM, any scout, any executive to give anybody in the media who covers the draft any real information. So it's all dependent upon us believing that somebody has a good enough relationship that they're getting directional content. They're never going to get real content. And more than likely, they're getting shitty content. And so, Raybon, you mentioned Kelvin Banks earlier in the show. This is a guy who, the tackle from Texas, was not listed anywhere as the top overall offensive line prospect. It has been Will Campbell. All of a sudden, Evan, you can tell us the numbers. Kelvin Banks, could be going as high as number 6 to the Raiders at this point. What has the movement been like for him? But he's a very good example of, Raybon, what you're talking about. Evan, give us the numbers.
Yeah, it's been consistent movement, honestly. And each week, me and Raybon do the action podcast. Banks has been like the conversation every time because it's been steady. So he opened at 24 and a half. Even just yesterday on Bet365, he was at 13 and a half, but ends up 13 and a half over plus 350, ends up moving to now 7.5 at over at even odds. So, I mean, at this point, we're just trying to, I don't want to call it randomly, but we're just selecting offensive tackles at this point to put into that. I've seen Membu at that 6 slot. As soon as we heard Jeanty going 5, I think everyone is trying to figure out what the heck the Raiders are going to do, especially because it's a new Raiders. There's Brady involved. There's Kara. I just think we don't know this Raiders team. So I think trying to figure out what's going on there. But Banks, ton of mock drafts. If Jeanty doesn't go 5, I think he'll go 6. I think. But if he goes 5, I think Membu, Banks are both the possibilities there. But I think if I look at it right, I think Banks has been the biggest mover up out of almost anyone. Second's probably McMillan, but right now it's Banks. The numbers are crazy. I sent a screenshot to Raybon and our producer Matt Mitchell last night. Banks was minus 1,200 to go top 10 at a certain book at that point. It's just the movement's insane.
And nothing has happened. That's what's crazy. So that's why I tell people should like, Evan, you were talking about Banks being like the number 2 tackle at what, like 10 to 1 odds and greater than that. Like, you were high on Banks when he was still, people are still mocking him as a guard. Now all of a sudden he's like the top tackle. Like, what? Nothing has happened. No one, he didn't block anyone. Like, what are we doing?
Well, this is what I love about the draft. And I do want to get to Simon, you've laid out your positions, but Raybon and Evan, I want you to recap positions for people.
Sure.
Shedeur Sanders, defensive end from Texas A&M. You know, he's got 4.5 career sacks in 3 seasons, but he tested as the best athlete at the combine. He's either Mike Mamula, who old heads will remember Mike Mamula, who was a defensive end at Boston College who had done nothing, went to the combine, and all of a sudden became a top 10 pick for the Philadelphia Eagles because his athleticism so wowed every single scout there. Or, you know, the Wall Street Journal, which you guys know I love the sports section of the Wall Street Journal, they had a story this morning about Stewart where, you know, people are grading him as anything from Javon Curse, who was an athletic freak who played for the Titans, to Myles Garrett, who is going to be in the Hall of Fame for the Cleveland Browns. But the guy didn't do anything in college. And the response you get is, well, it wasn't a scheme. It wasn't a system that was conducive to him doing anything. Why can anyone say that? And everyone accepts that without any pushback whatsoever. If the guy is that good of an athlete in college football, what coach isn't building the system to take advantage of a guy who can dominate like that? You don't make like a guy like that a fucking compliment on the defensive line. You make him the focal point of the defensive line. This makes no sense to me. Simon, explain it to me.
Because you're going from it from just one perspective, where it does work out that way, where you're taking the potential. And I get where you're coming from, Chad, because there are, in my opinion, way more misses than hits. But when you do hit on the right type of potential, it's like you got an all-timer, all-pro. Like, my favorite ever will always be the Jordan Mailata. Like, a guy played rugby, was a nobody. The Eagles had them on their board, so we can get this kid in the 7th round. He's some Australian guy that plays rugby. He's 18. He's big as shit. We'll turn him into a left tackle. Now he's probably number 1, number 2 best left tackle. I know what you're saying, Chad, but I'm saying that's drafted on potential, where, like you're saying, the first round, to me, I'm with you, that the risk isn't the same. Where you're taking a guy, a potential in the first round of that great of risk. It is not the same. But these teams talk themselves into it, Chad, because they see these guys work out and they say, well, we have much better coaching. Like, right? This kid's not wasting time going to class. He's going to be in here working, putting the work in. Where, like you're saying, it doesn't work that way. So I'm with you. I hate it, but I get why they do it, because for every, 4 or 5 misses, the one team that does it on the one guy, it's huge in football, right? It's game changing potential. So I'm with you. It's tough, but there's this draft class, like we're talking about here. Like Chris said, it's a weak draft class. To me, I love this draft class because they're all, it feels like, the same type of level. Like you can get really good guys at pick 42, 45 as these teams reaching right now at pick 7, pick 6. So to me, it's really interesting. Like we're talking about here, like Will Campbell, some people, Chad, don't even have him as a first rounder because of his arms. Like that's what I'm saying. This is crazy that this kid might go pick 4 and you have some scouts that have a second round grade on him because of potential. So yeah, this is gonna be a crazy draft class. I can tell you that from just the get go.
You get some great second rounders in the first round this year.
I think that's true, though. I think that's why the trading back is so interesting right now, because I think other teams are looking at the board and saying to themselves, okay, well, we can draft at 11 or 12 or 13, or we can try to double up and triple up and get more players. Because I do think it's a little bit level. Like, look at the defensive line. You have like 7, 8, 9 defensive linemen who could be going in the first round. And I'm sure teams' grades are all over the place. Like, even Stewart is 5th or 6th. If you look at order on some mock drafts. So it's just about preference. I think a preference draft is a real good way to kind of cap it.
Yeah, and you're going to take more risks in a year like this. So Stewart, listen, the top quarterback and in the second quarterback, definitely. Some teams I don't think have a top 50 grade on Shedeur Sanders. Cat McMillan. The same thing was said about him. He's the consensus #1 receiver. And then the minute they said that about him, the next day, all of a sudden, teams in the top 6 are wanting to draft. That's complete damage control. Like, to your point about, there's a lot of the media is kind of being used as, mouthpieces. So that's why I'm just kind of like anti. You just got to kind of fade the consensus. And the earlier you start doing it in the process, the better positions you're going to have. But, oh man, this is just a great draft for kind of going against the grain, because I think teams legit have like 8 to 12 first round grades, if that. So it could go any which way.
All right, well, I want to get into Raybon to what your thoughts are right now. I just say one more thing before I ask you that question is, if the Bears draft Shedeur Stewart, I am going to freaking lose it, because we know the Bears need a defensive end. And if this is how they decide to spend their draft capital, I will freak out. Also, we're pouring one out. R.I.P. Steve McMichael, 1985 Bears legend. Raybon, give me your.
I just want to say real quick, Chad, but that's our point, though, is you can get a DN in the second round. That's why, like, this class is so fun.
Let's get Shedeur Stewart in the second round. Let's not get him at number 10.
But that's all I'll just say. For your drafting style, like, you not wanting to draft on someone that only gets 4 sacks in college, you don't want to draft on that potential. There are more than half the GMs are legit your drafting style, Chad. So you're not an island there. So people might think Chad's being off basis. He's not. Like, there's a lot of guys that think the exact same way, but there's always going to be that young punk, right? The new guy with his computer that's going to come in and be like, no, the numbers say this and they say that. So yeah, I just want to give both perspective that I agree with Chad, that I draft the same way. I would never draft someone that's not a football player first. That to me is the biggest thing. I want an athlete, all that, but I want a football player first. So I think Chad's the same way.
Listen, Chad loves hitting home runs. Chad loves being a genius for finding a diamond in the rough. I'm looking at 3 people that I have hired over the course of my career who had no business doing any of the jobs that I hired them for. And it turns out they were genius moves. Home runs. But Chad knows that home runs are really hard to hit. And Chad knows that at the end of the day, if you're building a team, you got to have a lot of people who are really good at what they do and have proven that they're really good at what they do and have proven they can deliver at high numbers over an extended period of time if you're going to spend the money. Chad understands these things. Shedeur Stewart, Chad would not be making Shedeur Stewart a first round pick. Raybon, give me your best bets right now.
Okay, so we're doing this, on the day of the draft. So a bunch of over-unders are kind of going crazy. So those are the ones I've been attacking today. So I'll run through some pretty quick. Kelvin Banks Jr. over pick 7.5 at even money. He's still probably the consensus across all mocks. He's still at 13, but I think 10 is probably a much more realistic, even if you want to buy into the hype, but it's all hype. Then I got Tet McMillan over pick 12.5 at plus 160. I think he's at best probably a 50-50 shot to go to the Cowboys. We don't even know if they prefer him to Golden. And I think the stuff about the Jags and the Raiders, that was all just damage control after you had and like mock drafters saying they had low grades on him, and you had teams or reportedly teams saying they barely had him cracking the top 50. So I think that's great value. Then I got Will Johnson under pick 24.5. I think the slide has been too crazy. I mean, he was going in the top 10 at some points, and nothing's really changed, but all of a sudden, now he's not even going to crack the top 24. I think that's crazy. And then Milroe over pick 38.5. I mean, we're talking about the QB2 falling out of the first round. I think it's more of a indictment on the whole quarterback class than the fact that like Anthony Richardson light is going to dart up people's draft boards. So fading him. And one more, Emeka Egbuka. This one's probably makes me the most nervous, but over pick 26.5 at plus 122 or over pick 29.5 at plus 215. I just, most times I've seen him mocked have been like pick 30, 31, 32, or just out of the first round completely, because there's still a lot of potential to kind of jockeying for position with the quarterback situations. And there's still, I think, more defensive players that there's going to be runs on positions, like corner and edge rush kind of coming to an end where teams are going to feel comfortable kind of waiting on him. So like him to not crack the top 30 either. I think in general, I think offensive skill positions are a bit inflated in this draft, top to bottom in the first round.
Ev, I want to get your latest as well, but let me ask the group right now. Based on what we're hearing about Sanders, what you just said about Milroe, Raybon, like if the number 2 rated passer may fall out of the first round, what do we think of under 2.5 quarterbacks taken in the first round?
I'm a fan.
It's kind of, yeah, it's probably just not the best way to attack it, because there is the possibility that, they like just if one team trades up, then another team might have to trade up just to make sure, because New Orleans is looming. But I think it's probably more likely than not that it's round 2 is what we thought round 1 was going to be, and no one moves like anywhere.
The interesting thing is, I think Raybon hit on that though. I've been betting this draft with him for like over a month now, and I don't think I've touched that market of the 2.5 quarterbacks, because I think there's just different ways to play it. But if I had to bet it, I'd probably say under 2.5. Just going through some of my bets though, I've been betting SEC players over 14.5 for a while now. It's under 2 to 1, under 1 to 2, so it's minus 195, minus 190. I don't have to go through all the players, but I do think 15 is the record. It would tie the record, and I see at least 15, 16 getting in there. So that's one bet I like. I was with Raybon on Banks. Listen, I've got Banks top 10 at like 7 to 1, 6 to 1. So at this point, over 7.5 is going to be the way that I'm at least going to get back into the market to play it the other way a little bit. Some first round bets I like. So I've been on Kenneth Grant for a long time now. I got him at minus 230, minus 250. He's up to like 350 at some places, but there is a book out there that'll let you like parlay first round picks. So I think there's at least an ability to put him in a parlay to potentially do something. The other one I like is Siobhan Revel. He was 3 to 1 yesterday to get in the first round, cornerback. He's now plus 180. I think anything above like plus 150 range is still something I would consider. And the other one I keep betting, and listen, I don't know because the odds keep coming down, but I'm still a fan, is Hampton to be the second running back. I just have him over Henderson in almost every scenario. It's down to like minus 250. I've seen minus 230. I still think at 20 at Denver, and even if they both fall to the end of the first round or second round, I still see Hampton as a better option. So right now, those are probably the ones I would consider. I will say this. Yesterday, I took some dart throws on McMillan at 9 and McMillan at 10. complete dart throws. 18 to 1 at 9, 25 to 1 at 10. They're both now 16 to 1 and under. So him kind of falling or being, I know the trade up is kind of crazy at this point, but in those slots seem to be getting some momentum. I have some specials, but we can talk about that in a second. Those are direct from Bet365. But right now, again, a lot has moved, but those are probably the bets.
Simon, anything to add other than what we've discussed?
Yeah, I would say from the beginning of the show, what Chris said about, all this crazy movements off people's very late mock drafts of the last couple of days, embrace it. Like they're talking about the Banks play, go against the norm. And that quarterback movement to me is incredibly interesting, Chad, because it was up to what, minus 350, the over on quarterbacks in the first round. So that is either they're moving that off air or someone incredibly smart with a lot of money and knows what's going on in the league took a position the books respected and moved off it. Now, more often than not in the draft, Chad, they move off air. So I'm probably going to be patient. I'm going to hope the public keeps following. I'm probably going to bet the over 2.5, and I'll probably bet the over 3.5, just because I know next year's draft class is really strong with quarterbacks, but we've seen these teams trade back into the first round to get the quarterback just because of the fifth-year option, right? Like, how many times have we seen that happen? I'll bank on that, but I do agree where it's like we're going to know pretty quick, right? If Sanders falls to 21, Chad, I'm probably going to eat that bet. That's probably a dead bet, because if Pittsburgh or any of these teams pass on him and he falls out of the first, I'm going to need to get really lucky on Dart and Milrow to hit this bet. So it really is a bet where I'm, like I said in the beginning of the show, I'm heavy on betting on Sanders, heavy on Jeanty. I need a little bit of luck with Sanders here, because every move I've made, it's gone against me. It just keeps going down. So, the people in the know, I know Chris wants to say something here. That I might be way off on Sanders.
No, what I was going to say is another position that I'm kind of really strong on is Sanders not to go to Pittsburgh. I think even people that are mocking him there, and that's what a lot of the books are kind of moving off, to Simon's point, they're just saying, like, Pittsburgh just needs a quarterback and we don't know what else to do,
right.
So we're mocking him there, right?
Yeah.
He just makes the least sense from a skill perspective, given the receivers they have. And I know now they're talking about trading Pickens, so who knows? But I think that it's again, he didn't work out for them. It just doesn't happen that teams end up going with a quarterback who they didn't do any pre-draft work with. And on top of that, Pittsburgh could have a deal with Aaron Rodgers in place, and they just don't want to tip their hand. And Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to deal with more camp and media questions and stuff and Pickens questions. And so they might, who knows, but I think that's a great way to fade some of this in a smart way, is Giants plus 650. You could get as high to draft Sanders, and the Browns, you could still get at plus 550. If Pittsburgh passes on him, the second round might literally just be what we thought the first round was going to be for most of the process, where it's the Browns or the Giants, and one of them takes Dart and one of them takes Sanders. And I think that's a really smart way to attack it, because I just do not think that Pittsburgh makes a lot of sense for Shedeur.
With that thought process, Milrow probably slides as well, which is why the 38.5 that you posted, I think, is interesting, because if you believe that they slide, he's going to slide as well.
Yeah, and we're hearing stuff about Shuck. We're hearing Milrow, teams have probably a second, third round grade on him. But yeah, if you just look at the draft order, who's really trying to trade up for him even in that? It just doesn't. None of this quarterbacks are usually just inflated. There's the one odd year where sometimes a bunch of quarterbacks go, but generally speaking, books can choose who they post. And you don't see over-unders on Connerly or guys like fringe first rounders that would kind of take the place of some of these inflated guys. So just don't get caught up in the hype. That's
you would agree though, Chris. There's so many teams you wouldn't be shocked. Like the Jets taking Sanders at 7.
Oh yeah,
wouldn't shock you just because they're a desperate team with a crazy owner. So there's a lot of that where it's there are teams who need quarterbacks. Justin Fields, he's not the answer to the Jets' future, right? So I do think that part's interesting. Where there was a bunch of dark horse teams we don't even know about that could just take one of these quarterbacks.
Guys, in less than 24 hours, we're going to know the answers.
Unless they all
we're
fall
going to be geniuses.
We might not know.
Yeah, Shedeur, we may not know, but
You
yes.
might
That's
not
true.
know. You might
Well,
not
we'll
know
know a
anything
lot.
about any quarterback we talked about.
If
except
Shedeur
for
hasn't
one.
been drafted, we'll know a lot more than we did right now.
That's fair.
As a reminder,
Steelers just moved to -150 to take Sanders. So that
Another
that
mock
number's
came in and
moving.
they didn't know
That
where else
number's
to put
moving.
him.
that's right. As a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. New Bet365 customers get $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5. Sign up using promo code Favorites. Deposit $10, place a bet for $5 to get $150 in bonus bets. Those bonus bets can be used on spreads, totals, player props, futures, and more. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, or 18 and older. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Simon and I will return with our next episode of The Favorites on the Action Network YouTube page Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, talking about NFL draft grades. Download us from Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you get your pods. Rate, review, subscribe, leave us 5 stars. Say whatever you want. Feedback is a gift. Until next time, love you.